Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I've got 4 exciting Dogman encounters coming from the continent of Africa. Yeah, you heard it, Africa. Before we get into these encounters, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch links to help this channel continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel, which is for creepypasta, fan fiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that don't fit on this channel. If that's anything that you're into, follow that link below and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. And with that, guys, let's get on with these 4 African Dogman encounters. Shall we? Today's first encounter. My encounter happened when I was 8 years old, when we went to visit my grandmother on my father's side in a rural area called Morawa. If you didn't know, rural areas at the time where secluded people's houses were not close to each other. In these areas, there are many stories of the paranormal, and they are rife with it. Back to my encounter, we were coming back from visiting my grandmother late at night when I felt the need to pee. Since we were in a bushy area, my father decided to stop the car and let me pee in the bushes. I got out, walked a few meters away from the car, maybe 10. Then I started to relieve myself. I felt a fear that I never felt since I had the sense of being watched. I started hearing a deep breathing, like someone had been running long distance. I looked at a certain bush which had a meter-long grass, I think, and I could see eyes glowing goldish yellow looking at me. As I looked at these eyes, the creature stood up with this popping sound, coming out like crackling your fists. It was bigger and taller, far taller than that meter-long grass. I didn't see what the body looked like, but I could see the outline of its head. It had pointy ears in the shape of a German shepherd's head. I quickly ran back to the car, peeing myself a little, and jumped on my mother's lap. She asked me what was wrong, but I didn't say anything. Clearly, no one in the car saw what I saw. I decided not to say anything. Those eyes haunted me for the longest time. I was deathly afraid of the dark, and I admit, I'm still a little bit afraid of the dark. It was years later, as I was watching a movie called Dog Soldiers, that I realized and recognized what I saw. I asked a workmate of mine who grew up in the rural areas about such things, and he told me of legends of some sort of creature with the head of a hyena. Now, people in the rural area wouldn't know werewolves, so as a matter of perception, they call it a chitama. Today's second African Dogman encounter happened in a Dambosha caves. 3 individuals who regularly snuck into the area to drink and just hang out. They should start guarding these places better. One night, as usual, they snuck in and went to their regular spot to drink. It was late at night, and they sat there discussing their problems and generally how bad the country has gotten. As they were doing this, they started to hear laughter coming from a near brush of the woods. Initially, they thought it was someone laughing at them, and they decided to ignore this. They continued talking what they were talking about, but the laughter came again, this time annoyingly loud. They turned to look at the bush, only to reveal green eyes looking at them. The thing, though, was these eyes were 7 feet tall. For some reason, perhaps shock, they were stuck there, just staring at those green eyes. Then this creature stepped forward from the brush to reveal under the moonlight that it had the head of a hyena and fur with black spots on it. They couldn't really see the color of the fur, but they could tell that it was a lighter color. It had a hunched back with lean muscle structure and standing on 2 legs. But they didn't notice what the legs looked like. They noticed the claws on its hand. Yes, this thing had hands. It roared at them like a lion would, and that sort of jump-started them into running for a short while they could hear this thing chasing them, but it stopped. They kept running despite the fact that it had stopped chasing them. They ran all the way to the main road and all the way to the shops. They agreed not to talk about it, nor tell anyone about it. Today's third African Dogman encounter. Todd and James, fictitious names, drove to the Nyanga Mountains from Harahar to investigate the mysteries of this mountain. They arrived quite late, maybe around 11 p.m., when the entrance was closed. Armed with a camera, they snuck in from the other side of the mountain, where it wasn't properly protected. As they went higher up the mountain, it seemed like it was getting more silent, and they felt like they were being watched. Jim started rolling the camera, putting it into night vision mode. He noticed creatures moving around them, silently and quickly. Jim states, "Todd, something is out there," he says. "Let's just turn back and leave," Todd said nervously. They turned around and walked back the way they came, but it seemed like they were lost. They had walked for 30 minutes up to this point, but the way back seemed to have changed suddenly. They started to hear howls really close by from all around them, except in a particular direction. They ran that particular direction, and they heard several heavy footsteps behind them. It sounded like a stampede behind them, and Jim dropped the camera while running out of fear. Jim unfortunately tripped and fell, but he managed somehow to immediately turn and sitting on his behind to face what he thought was his death. Todd kept going, screaming, not realizing that his friend had just fallen and he was leaving him behind. Jim faced the darkness as he saw several red eyes looking at him. One of the creatures approached him, and its eyes turned goldish yellow. It was on all fours, moved like a hyena, but looked like a wolf, but with a very short snout. He could see anything else because it seemed to capture him with its eyes. It installed a fear in him that he never felt before and since. He closed his eyes with tears streaming down his face. He heard it growl and felt nasty breath on his face. It smelt of rotten meat. He kept his eyes shut, and suddenly everything went silent. He opened them and all the creatures were gone. He got up and ran, following his friend, and caught up with him where they had parked the car. "What happened to you?" Todd asked with tears in his eyes, but Jim couldn't answer. They got in the car and headed for the lodge so they could rest. Now, when asked, Jim said that when the creature looked into his eyes, it gave him an impression that it wanted him to go back with his friend and tell them what he saw. "Yes, I exist, and if you dare come back to my domain, I will kill you." Today's fourth and final African Dogman encounter. The encounter I'm going to tell happened near Hawagi National Park last year, while a father and son were on their way to Bulawayo late at night. The son was driving as he had recently got his driver's license. They were coming from a housing project the father had won, where they were surveying the land. Naturally, they were excited for the project, so the mood was extremely good. As they were traveling along, there was a loud pop, and the car suddenly swerved to the side of the road. It was a blown tire. Luckily, no one was hurt, and the car wasn't too badly damaged. Where they had stopped was the middle of nowhere and seemed to be unnaturally silent. They were set about to change the tire, feeling nervous for some reason, and the good feeling had gone away. They had left the headlights on the car on for some light. With the light that was there, they could see shadows moving around the car. They started to hear heavy, deep growling. The father kept his cool for the son's sake as he started freaking out. "Just keep working on changing the tire," said the father, and he frantically finished changing the tire. As they got in the car, they saw 4 pairs of goldish yellow eyes just by the edge of the darkness. The sun floored the accelerator and they sped up, but their horror, these eyes started following them, matching their speed. One of the creatures ran past the car only to reveal something they never thought possible. It was running on all four legs, moving unlike anything they had ever seen. It looked at them and they saw the head of a wild dog, but with more fangs. It was built like a lean, fit basketball player with well-defined muscles. They realized in that instant that they were being hunted. He pressed the accelerator to the end, praying and hoping that the car was fast enough to lose him. As the car passed the creature, it suddenly and fluidly stood up and revealed that it was 7 feet tall and had hands with claws. It reached out for the car before the car accelerated away from them. As soon as they knew they were somewhat safe, the father broke down and cried. It was a mixture of relief and shock. African Dogman, African were hyena, I don't even know. These things are vicious. I told my friend, the disciple, about this upload I was going to do. I'm very excited about it. And he couldn't believe that there was Dogman in Africa. Well, there is. And they're pretty nasty creatures. I hope you guys enjoyed these 4 Dogman encounters of Africa. I know I did. Now, I've been doing a lot of research lately, and I've got some stories to share with you. I've got 2 subscriber stories coming out, probably Sunday, and more Dogman encounters Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And with that, guys, I bid you farewell, and have a great weekend.